open source and operating systems, and I had found Atheos and I joined Syllable, and I thought, okay, got that piece covered. Inspired by AmigaOS and BOS should be alright. And we have a desktop operating system. And then after Python I found Ruby, and then suddenly I remembered, hey, in the back of my head, this Karl Sassenrath, who came in the picture again with Syllable through that heritage. So he was working on a language, and that was early days, and I've been doing Lotus Notes for 4 or 5 years, so I should have another look at it. And then when I had another look at Rebel, I saw that it was exactly offering the fundamental things that you need to build a groupware system. It was exactly what I, in my mind, had formulated that I needed and thought would never be able to find because open source was so fragmented. And then I said, yeah, of course, because 4 years ago he said that he was going to write an internet operating system, but he first needed to design a very new language, and he said, if you don't have a certain language, and I think you said similar things about Rascal and philosophic things, if the language limits what you can write. So if you don't have a certain type of language, there are certain types of programs that you will never write because it's not logical or too much work or too far out.
To compare it to what some people say that you can see a ship from the American land when you don't know the word for ship.
Yeah, could be. Yeah, yeah.
You know the story?
Yeah, something like that, what they tell about the Indians.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's goes up. Yeah, that idea, that philosophical idea. And that thoughts are very much formulated in language for the last several thousand years. Mm-hmm. And that your language thus limits your thoughts, and that limits what you can think of and invent.
But I want to put the other side of that medal on the table as well, right? It not only limits it, but it also makes it possible to express yourself.
Yeah.
So.
He said that with Rebel, he said there are certain programs that you will write that you never thought would be possible or that you never considered you would ever going to write. And to return to your question, 10 years ago I also decided it's so much work, I'm going to be an integrator, I'm going to look for things very hard and find them and try to integrate them. And because I know these are humongous projects, and Lotus Notes was about 100 developers, and after that he got another $100 million and he did Groove. In the same time that Karl Sassenrath did Rebel, and he also 90 developers when you heard about that. And it's huge. You know, I think knowing about software development, if you have 100 developers, how can you ever hope to have a non-complex system? It's inevitable. So one thing is that having a very small team, or even just yourself, can be a huge advantage. And then the other thing is that you know that someone can deliver a language to you that will enable you to write things that you could never do otherwise. Then you can also do things that a team of 4,500 programmers on Windows, it doesn't matter that there are 500 programmers, they can't do it because they don't have that language that makes it possible to think of it. So that's one of the reasons. So I was trying to just be an integrator, and I was trying to use the most advanced language I could find. And for many years I had to stop at Ruby because I had to use it for Syllable, so it had to be open source, and Rebel was not open source. So on the one hand, I knew that Rebel was the language that I needed to make a new Lotus Notes style system. And on the other hand, I couldn't use it in Syllable, which I wanted to use as the base platform, and because it wasn't open source. So I had to settle for Ruby for some things. So some things in Syllable are done in Ruby for that reason. But all those years, I wanted to have some open source form of Rebel so that I could integrate it with Syllable. And there have been several attempts, and what I want to present here is Boron, and that's the third generation of Karl Robillard's attempts. And he started with a reasonably one-to-one rebel clone. Then he said it's inefficient for the machine, and then he started a postfix language, Thune, and I thought, well, that makes you think different. You have to bend your head for a fourth light language, and it's not going to be popular. And I always wanted, from my Atari 8-bit home computer in the 80s, I wanted computing to be available to more people, because the promise in the 80s was everyone's going to have a home computer, and it's going to have basic 5 seconds after you turn it on, and everyone can learn to program that. And then the grocery store around the corner can write its own small administration bookkeeping system if they want to, and they're the domain experts in their domain, so that way you can get to domain-specific languages if you want. So that was the whole thinking. And it was a huge problem. So I've been working on this problem for 8 years in Syllable, and thinking and researching more than 10 years now. But this is where it's at now. Almost a year ago, Karl Robillard announced that he was going to make a reasonably rebel-compatible language again. It doesn't do syntax sugars such as infix, so you can't write 1 + 1. I think that's a usability problem. But if you look at programs, there are very few cases of infix that you use in rebel programming. So for the moment being, I think it's a good clone, because the first generation had been abandoned for several years already. So I've skipped the second generation, and now I'm going with his current developments again. And yeah, it's a very deeply designed language, Karl says, but I have this goal of making it suitable for many people. So I want to give a demonstration that shows how to very quickly make something useful with it. And the desktop is completely locked down. If you don't have Windows, you can't even present at a Software Freedom Day, because your presentation is PowerPoint. So that's still a problem. And but the place where you can use new languages is on the server. And the only catch is that it has to be a web application, because everyone makes web applications, and web applications have their own story of being horribly over-complex and this and that. But yeah, at least you can do something there. On the server you can try to use innovative languages.
Except don't implement the remove file.
No remove file.
Because if somebody from the web removes all this operating system.
But that's why I have Linux underneath. I have, I'll tell you after the talk, I have a demo site for Rebel where you get an HTML screen and you can type in a Rebel expression, and it's executed on our Syllable server, a Linux server, and it's been running for a year now. And sometimes the web server hangs in a 2-year-old version that I upgraded now, so maybe it can handle that now. But it's never been cracked or broken into or on the entire server or something. And even if something goes to 100% CPU use for a while, the other websites that are running on it, they're still fluid. That's because of the web server that I'm demonstrating this on. This is it's already going to localhost. So this is not a static HTML page. This is a page served by a web server running locally here on Syllable, graphical Syllable server. And the web server that we've chosen is Cheyenne, because it's written in Rebel. And Cheyenne itself is BSD licensed, so that's a step in the right direction. So I was going to ask, is there anyone in the room who knows, who can get an impression of Boron by looking at this list, and now we know that there is. Are there any more people who can relate to this list?
Possibly. Maybe you could larger the
partially, okay. That's good, because this is very deep information about language design. Wat zei je, Bos?
Could you enlarge in the fonts?
Are functions first class objects?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yes, they are. And actually, it goes deeper than that, because here, Rebel and thus Boron is not function-based like Lisp and Scheme, but is symbol-based. So it goes deeper than that. First class doesn't need to be a function or a lambda in Lisp talk. It's a symbol, but we get to see that in the next slides, because this is to give an impression what it is to language experts. And now we're going to start with the easy part. These are Boron's, Rebel's basic